Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles.
Chase Thornton.
Yeah, I mean, I got him.
And Adam LaRue. Don't hope to it. Be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome into Operation Domination. It's week 16, the second round of the majority of your fantasy football playoffs out there. And hopefully we can get you over that one last hump to get to that championship game. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with Adam LaRue and Chase Thornton. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app or check out our video content when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Gents, there's a lot to get to. We have a lot of topics in the forum, start sick questions, but these are really like the top topics going around fantasy football right now. And of course, we will wet our whistles at the end of the show with the DFS cocktail hour, because where would we be without some drinks in the house, especially with Chase and that bar in the background? We got to hit it with that. I want to open up the question, and I want to let Adam ask the question, because this is Adam coming personally with the question, but I also want to go off on something about this question. So ask your question.
Yeah. So in a Superflex Dynasty, I thankfully had a bye week this past week. So this did not impact my playoffs yet. But it will this week. I'm blessed to say, formerly was blessed to say that my QB2 in Superflex was Patrick Mahomes. Good situation to be in for the QB2. However, with his ACL now gone, the only quarterback that I was able to scramble and acquire is Quinn Ewers. So I am now asking you my top bench player or Quinn Ewers as my starter, and that top bench player is Juwan Jennings. So Juwan Jennings or Quinn Ewers for my Superflex spot. I guess some context, I average 180 points a week in this league, and my opponent's 160, so I shouldn't need a lot from this spot to still make it another week. But nonetheless, got to get the most I possibly can.
I'm going to jump in here real quick and say that if you follow this
monologue for a while,
yeah, because I know Dan's going to fire off on this one, and I'm anxious to hear it. But Jennings is not a bad play this week. Even if you weren't looking at him to replace a quarterback, he's a top 20 type play at receiver this week. Good matchup there with Indy. So I'm going to say that it should be Jennings, because if you followed this show for any length of time, you know that I'm not only not a big fan of Quinn Ewers, I can't stand him as a passer. FQE, remember that, everybody?
Yep.
Nobody
on this panel was high on Quinn Ewers.
No, none of us liked him. Maybe me more vehemently so, but nobody on this panel I didn't think he was a very good college quarterback. I don't think that he is going to be anything as a pro quarterback. It wouldn't shock me to see him have a single digit type, performance in this one from the quarterback position, whereas Juwan Jennings should get almost 10 points just on his receiving, whether or not he scores. So I'm going Jennings over Ewers here, but Dan, take it away. Let us hear it, please.
Well, first I'll answer the question. Juwan Jennings is my wide receiver 21 for the week. I'm not expecting, we'll find out tomorrow, but I'm not expecting to see Ricky Pearsall for this week. Let's just say I'd be surprised. He aggravated the PCL injury, came with an ankle injury, neither of which are sounding like they're too problematic, but I'd still be kind of surprised we saw him play this week. And even if he's out there, Juwan Jennings is more the red zone wide receiver than he is. Cincinnati's defense, while has no talent, has actually been kind of feisty against quarterbacks and wide receivers as of late. Not tight ends, not running backs, but quarterbacks and wide receivers as of late. Quinn Ewers is a bum. That's neither here. And in fact, when I had to put Quinn Ewers into my top 32 of quarterback rankings, I wanted to puke. But more so than that. So there's this guy named Mike McDaniel, who I thought was going to be fired in September. Trending that way. And it wasn't just me. Everybody thought that because the Dolphins were beyond pathetic. And then you looked up, it's December, and they had the same record as the Chiefs, which I know isn't saying a lot, but for a team that wasn't winning any ball games, it's not too bad. It's not too awful. They were actually trending in the right direction, playing things tough. This is a team that has no cap room. Most of it devoted to Tyreek Hill, who we don't know if he's coming back. He's, playing around with retiring. Jalen Waddle. Part of the contract they're paying on Jalen Phillips, so they traded off. Still paying Bradley Chubb. And paying Tua Tagovailoa. Basically, they're playing 6 players and they have no cap space. So that's number one. Tua Tagovailoa, you start going to owe him $55+ million against the cap next season, even if your plan is not to play him or to move on from him. You're going to bench him with 2 weeks left? Quinn Ewers was a day 3 draft pick. This isn't somebody you need to mess around with. You already have your guy locked in for next season. The Cleveland freaking Browns are going to give Deshaun Watson another chance next year. And the Dolphins are going to bench Tua. I don't care that he played awful against Pittsburgh. You're the Dolphins. You don't play with anybody in the North in December. What's new? Nothing. Mike McDaniel, you're an idiot. He's an idiot wrapped inside of a moron. And just when you think he starts to climb out of that little hole, he does something beyond stupid to let us know that he is very much nothing more than a man-child who wears khakis and golden sunglasses. To get out of here, he needs to be fighting. Quinn Ewers? Quinn Ewers was so bad that as much as the NFL, or I shouldn't even say that, the college football pundits wanted to bust him up in the first round, or the NFL went no, sorry, that's the 7th round draft pick. And I got to watch Quinn Ewers over Tua Tagovailoa. You remember when they used to say tank for Tua? You remember that?
Yeah.
It was like a long time ago.
It does. And it hasn't really panned out to that such, but you paid him $55 million a year and he's still under contract for another season with a team that has no cap space. If you're going to make this move, fire Mike McDaniel. Because if you're going to move on from Tua and still not have the cap space to sign anybody, well, guess what? You know what the Tennessee Titans are this season? What the Giants are this season? That's going to be the Dolphins next year. So you're just going to fire him next year anyway. This is, oh my God. Of all the stupid things you could possibly do, this is one of the dumbest. And then you didn't even have the decency to make him the quarterback 2. You made him the quarterback 3.
Right. And can I point out that the other quarterback on the roster is Zach Wilson, who has at least started before.
And so, look, if you're sitting there, fantasy-wise, Dan, I appreciate the sentiment of you going off. Fantasy-wise, what does this do? If you can't tell, I am an owner of Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane in a number of leagues where I am in the playoffs. Maybe Achane survives because he's Achane in Cincinnati. Maybe he survives. But that's the thing about Quinn Ewers. I don't even know if I can fully trust Achane to give me the elite level RB5 performance that I need from him and been dependent upon. And Jalen Waddle, who's been a very, very solid high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 since Tyreek Hill has been out, I don't even want to play him. In my model, Waddle fell to wide receiver 30. Darren Waller fell to tight end 15 against Cincinnati because it's Quinn Ewers.
Yeah. Ouch.
I mean, you just threw a bombshell on top of everybody for everything for no reason. This game's going to be in Miami. He plays well in Miami. I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest. This was absolutely the most insane thing I've ever seen, especially when you're a team that's gaining momentum. And it's again, he's under contract for another season. He's guaranteed money's under season. I know the Denver Broncos did it with Russell Wilson. It's now all of a sudden because they set that precedent that everyone thinks that they can get away with this. You can't. You're not going to draft the quarterback class sucks next year. Who are you going to draft? The Denver Broncos got lucky because they turned to Bo Nix and just turned into a game manager, and Sean Payton made it work with an elite defense. BT Dubs. Dolphins will have it. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. The point of that was that to start Juwan Jennings. I would start him over Quinn Ewers and Superflex.
Definitely.
Despite the quarterback situation. All right, let's talk about something else because I'm going to lose my mind. So one of the topics we have today, one of the questions we have today is which 2 would you start if you had the choice? And I'm going to go off of this as a half-point PPR league because I didn't really say what the scoring league was. The 3 choices are Omarion Hampton versus Dallas, Rico Dowdle versus Tampa Bay, or Terry McLaurin versus the Eagles. So which 2 of those 3 would you start, Chase?
All right. Well, for me, when I look at this, I want to go with the running backs over Terry McLaurin. And let me tell you why. I know that I realize that both running backs are in timeshares. We've actually talked a lot about the timeshares that these two guys are in the last couple of weeks here, but they both have pretty decent matchups, especially Hampton. I mean, Dallas gives up the 8th most points to opposing fantasy running backs here. And I could see him. I mean, he looks like the running back of the duo. I know Vidal looks like he's going to play more of a role in the pass game. Hampton can play a role in the pass game. Hampton, before the injury, he was actually seeing 6-7 targets a game. But for me, it's mostly just about McLaurin. It's about not wanting to play McLaurin more so than it is about wanting to play Omarion, Hampton, or Rico Dowdle. I mean, Terry McLaurin is facing Philadelphia. They've given up the 7th fewest points to opposing wide receivers. And Scary Terry's in the midst of like his scariest fantasy season. And I don't mean scariest in a good way, but like, you know, yes, he's had some injuries. He's only seen double-digit targets one time this year. And he's only had 5 or more catches 2 times. That's it. So, I mean, are you comfortable getting 4 catches for 30 some yards and maybe or maybe not a touchdown from him? If you don't think that Hampton or Dowdle can get ahead of that by, you know, red zone work alone, then I'm not sure what you're looking at, because for me, between the matchup and the year that McLaurin is having anyway, I don't want anything to do with him. I don't want to have to trust him in a playoff week. At least with Hampton and Dowdle, we've seen them this season have some blow up games. So I'm going with the running backs.
All right. Adam, you see that the same way or no?
I am taking the gamble with Hampton for sure. These 3 are like so goofy. I have gone back and forth on McLaurin and Dowdle, but to throw it out there, the best 2 games of Terry McLaurin's season, by far, have been with Mariota. And a lot of people have talked about potentially dropping him or him down because of it. I am boosting him because Mariota's playing, personally. And
but
that
those games are, I mean, he had 19 points against Denver. He had a great game against Denver, but that's the only game he saw double-digit targets in. Other than that, he's been really pedestrian.
Sure, but 14 targets is a lot of targets, and our sample size isn't that big. Dowdle, the situation in Carolina is just so bizarre. Before the bye, it seemed like Chuba was starting to get the job back. We come out of the bye, Dowdle seems to have the job back. Dowdle didn't look good, but Chuba didn't look good either. It's one of those situations. I think it depends on your risk tolerance. I think you're probably a lot more likely to get to 20 points with McLaurin. Probably also a lot more likely to get goose-egged with McLaurin. So I think it just comes down to your situation in that regards. I think Dowdle, because Dowdle, even when he's been the 2, has still gotten 10, 15 carries, which is probably good enough to get you to 10 points. So if it's like, hey, 10 points is cool, then maybe that's your option. If you need to swing for the fences, I think McLaurin's probably got a little bit higher of a ceiling, but it's a tricky situation, especially because where we've both agreed is Hampton, and that's a gamble in and of itself. He still hasn't broken 40% of the snaps. So it's that being your got to start 2 out of is really tough in the playoffs, and you have to take some swings. I'm not 100% sure on that last spot. I think part of me wants to lean McLaurin, but I don't have a super, super strong feeling there.
I echo that sentiment. That's why this question is so weird. Because they're all in the same area, right? Omarion Hampton is in the RB2 area. Rico Dowdle's in the RB2 area. Terry McLaurin's in the wide receiver 2 area. All 3 of them are kind of in that mix. And what inherently comes with that territory is volatile risk, right? So we were hoping Hampton was going to go from his 31% snap share that he had the week before in his first week back to 50. And that didn't really happen. He wound up going up to 37. Now, he did have 54% of the carries. He got a lot of touches when he played, but what we're kind of seeing play out here is that while both Vidal and Hampton had 4% of the targets, Vidal had 55% of the routes run. He played 100% of the long down distance. He played 100% of the 2-minute drill. Like, he was by far like, look, you are going to be the passing down back. So that tells me we got a bit of a game script dependency here when you have a guy who's playing more than 50% of snaps and is the passing down back, even if Omarion Hampton is the guy who's going to touch the ball more often on early downs and at the goal line. So the trouble is we have a game script against the Dallas Cowboys, who we know when they get the opportunity like to put up a lot of points. The Chargers are okay. They're not bad, but they're not great either on the defensive side of the ball. The offense scares me because they've essentially been in shambles ever since the offensive line fell apart, and they've been really limited as a sense. And then I look at Dallas, like, look, they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in 4 weeks. Now, they've allowed touchdowns to the running backs, which has kept up fantasy football value for sure. Like Jahmyr Gibbs was running back 1 that week because he had 3 touchdowns. But he didn't have a great game as a rushing producer. So, like, there's been some things here with Dallas to them getting better. On the flip side of that, I will mention this. Quinn Williams was not playing in practice today. We'll see. It doesn't mean he's definitely not going to go, but that's something to watch. If he doesn't play, that can make a huge difference for sure. So keep your eye on that. On the Dowdle side of things, Adam, you mentioned it. He had 58% of the snaps coming out of the bye, when the week before the bye, Chuba Hubbard had 59% of the snaps. And leading up to that point, as Hubbard seemingly got healthier, he was definitely much more efficient. So we thought that switch was going to happen, and it was like, well, nope, not so fast. We're going to go right back to Rico Dowdle. But so similar to the Vidal and Hampton thing going on, Dowdle and Hubbard seem to have their roles. Hubbard is the passing down guy. He is leading in long down distance and 2-minute drill and routes run, and everything about that part leads to Hubbard. And Rico Dowdle's more the early down goal line guy. That has stayed true, whether it's been Dowdle playing more snaps or Hubbard playing more snaps over the last few weeks. Well, then let's take into consideration of the matchup against Tampa Bay. They've allowed the 9th fewest rushing yards to the running back, but they've given up the most receiving yards to the running back. So it kind of makes me think that Chuba Hubbard might wind up being more valuable than Rico Dowdle in a matchup where we might see a sneaky type of shootout, and Tampa Bay's allowing all these passing yards, not necessarily rushing yards. And neither one of these guys are Bijan Robinson, by the way. So don't get overly excited when you watch that Thursday night game. Then let's get to Terry McLaurin, who's been the wide receiver 18 over the last 3 games since he's been back. And with Marcus Mariota, finishes the wide receiver 9 versus Denver. So even though they have a really tough matchup again this week against the Philadelphia Eagles, we've already seen that with Mariota, Terry McLaurin can still have good performances against tough defenses. So ultimately, this is what it winds up being. I believe Terry McLaurin will get enough matchups to the opposite corner of, and whether that's, Adoree Jackson or whoever, will get enough matchups the opposite corner of Quinyon Mitchell. He won't see Cooper DeJean very often because he doesn't really line up in the slot. So Terry McLaurin is definitely one of the guys I'm going with. The second guy is slightly Omarion Hampton. I literally have him ranked 23rd with Dowdle ranked 26 heading to this ballgame. It is close. It is slightly Hampton because it is Dallas and the touchdowns have been there. Where with Tampa Bay, again, I think it could wind up being a Chuba Hubbard week, and that thing is definitely uber fluid. Does anybody have a comment they want to piggyback on that or rebuke? So I know
you make good points. You make great points about their situations. I don't, and I'm willing to admit maybe my bias. I mean, you're talking about McLaurin. He just hasn't been reliable this season, so I'm worried about that. And I'm willing to bet on these other 2 running backs over a wide receiver that I never know if he's going to show up or not. I think Adam was exactly right, though. McLaurin would be the bigger swing, no matter which 2 of the 3 you take. McLaurin can be the biggest swing of all 3 of them.
And I'm willing to take more bigger swings when I get in the playoffs. Because you're playing against good teams, you got to put up more points. All right, so let's move on here then. Should I start Aaron Jones over Ashton Jeanty? This is one of the questions that's come in. So Adam, I'll go to you here first.
No. It's the same thing as when we talked about Jeanty last week. Like, I think that receiving upside just kind of keeps him afloat to where I'd rather go. And as you laid out also very well last week, he's got all the traits of a workhorse. He just doesn't really have the stats for it. And Aaron Jones, it's been so bizarre. He, beginning of the season, didn't look like much, got hurt, came back off the injury, started to look really good, and then has been kind of pedestrian the last couple of weeks. I am currently just Jeanty by product of volume. I'm just taking that risk over the other one. It sucks because the Raiders suck, but the volume's there, and I can trust that a little bit more.
Chase, do you agree?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. I mean, Jones is in a timeshare with Mason, for better or worse, he is. And if you look at it, Jordan Mason's actually been the better back on a points per snap, fantasy points per snap earned basis this year. Jeanty's carries have kind of dropped in the last month or two, but that's okay. Cause like you just said, I mean, he wasn't running for anything anyway. That offensive line is terrible. Jeanty gets hit as soon as he grabs the ball, but his targets have come up. If you take a look at it, I mean, we've seen Jeanty have blow up games this season, even with that terrible offensive line, even with almost no quarterback play to speak of. We have not seen one of those from Jones this season. Aaron Jones's best game this season is 14.4 half PPR points. Jeanty's done that on just his receiving work alone in a couple of games this season, let alone his rushing stats and inside the 20. The Giants, I know they're a great matchup for Jones, but this is one of those situations where you have to look at it and be like, don't just play the matchup because the matchup looks juicy. You have to actually think about the situation that these players are in, and Jeanty's the better player. He's the better option.
I've been waiting for one. I finally get to hit the button. I feel pretty good about this one. Okay. So I am going to start Aaron Jones. Ashton Jeanty is my running back 30, I believe this is running back 30 this week. Aaron Jones is coming in as my running back 20. No, I'm sorry. My running back 19. Actually, he's going to be my running back 20 because I'm going to be flipping him and Breece Hall around soon. But my running back 20 on the week. So I got about a 10 spot difference, and I have Aaron Jones inside the top 24. Now, what you guys laid out about Jeanty and about Aaron Jones is absolutely true. Ashton Jeanty over the last 5 games has averaged about 6.8 targets per game. That has kept his volume alive to that point. And Aaron Jones has been splitting time with Jordan Mason as of late. If you look at the last 4 weeks, it's not impressive. He's been the running back 50 during that time. But I'm paying more attention to the last 2 weeks. So the last 2 weeks, he's had 15 opportunities each of those last 2 weeks. That's not bad for a running back, even if he is splitting time with Jordan Mason, because they are going to be more run heavy because they're trying to find ways to hide J.J. McCarthy. And the last couple of weeks, it's actually worked to some degree. And his efficiency is still there. His explosiveness is still there. So Aaron Jones still getting about 4.4 yards per carry. He's still making guys miss. We've seen little pop runs here and there. Ashton Jeanty, over the last 5 games, 2.7 yards per carry. He's only had 2 missed tackles forced in the last 5 games. So that's not just the offensive line is bad. That is Ashton Jeanty just running the dudes and not really making the extra play to make guys miss on top of it. Something I think he will do later on in his career, but it ain't happening this season. And even when he does get targeted, we're still talking about 3.8 yards per target. So he's not giving you a ton of production off of the extra volume that he's targeting. Let's talk about one more thing. I have a very good feeling it's going to be Kenny Pickett again this week. Kenny Pickett helped the Raiders put up a goose egg against the Philadelphia Eagles, which are a good defense, and only 64 yards passing. What in the hell do you think he's going to do against Houston? Like, it ain't going to get much better. That gets scarier, not better. So you're going to talk about an offense who's already 32nd in the league in scoring, going up against one of, if in my opinion, the top defense in the NFL. And it's already made Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty, despite all the volume that they had against the Eagles, look absolutely pathetic anyway. Remember, Ashton Jeanty was not a starting running back for fantasy football purposes last week, even though he's in a similar situation. And Aaron Jones is getting the Giants, who's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back and getting 15 opportunities, and a guy who could actually still show me some burst. I'm going to take the chance on Aaron Jones, not Ashton Jeanty. You have been, look, if you've even made the playoffs to this point with Ashton Jeanty, I applaud you because he has burnt you way more than he's helped you. And at least with Aaron Jones as your RB2, you know you can expect at least a floor given the matchup in this one. So I'll let you guys rebuttal.
No, fair points. Fair points. I mean, yeah, like you just said, if you made the playoffs with Ashton Jeanty, kudos, because you had to spend a high draft pick. He was one of your top 2 picks, and he has not been top 2 pick worthy for the vast majority of the season. You make some, I mean, yeah, it's a scary matchup playing against Houston. And it sucks, but I think that he can get north and south just, if he can just get past the first guy grabbing him on a handoff, I think he's got a touchdown in him. I don't think Jones has a touchdown in him this week, so I'm still going to go Jen.
Yeah, the fantasy points just haven't been there for Jones the last month. I agree. He's looked like the better running back, to be extremely clear. But the fantasy points just haven't been there. Even with Jeanty, agreed, it's been kind of putrid. Has a 24-point game just a few weeks ago, and has another 10-point game the week after. Aaron Jones hasn't broken, 9 in a month? It's just been brutal fantasy-wise for him. I think they're not throwing to the running backs enough, and they're not like he has gotten a lot of carries, but they're not throwing to the running backs a lot. And Jordan Mason's been getting a good mix of the goal line work, so it's just been really tough for him to get like fantasy point stuff going. And with it, one thing to throw out there with the matchup as well, Houston is a bad matchup on defense altogether. To be clear. Yes. They are much better for passing, much better, or much work, like better. Again, much harder
matchup for passing than they are running back. Yes.
Right. And where I think it gets a little bit better for them, the Arizona game this past week notwithstanding, the offense really doesn't put teams away that often. Normally they score their points per game on the season. They're in the bottom half of the league. They're at 23. The Raiders are at 14, the worst in the NFL. So, but point being, like, there's a decent chance this ends up being something like 27-14, not 40-10, where a running back is still allowed to get carries into the third quarter. By the fourth, probably not. But into the third quarter, Jeanty could still be getting carries somewhat regularly. It's not like a team that is typically, like I said, Arizona last week they did, but typically they're not really stepping on teams' necks. They're kind of letting you play the whole game. So that's the case for Jeanty, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, with Jones, Jones has been averaging about 8 points a game ish, like over the past month and a half. Jeanty is seeing 7.5 targets, almost 8 targets per game, and catching half of those or more. That gets him an appreciable amount of that distance to 8 points a game, even if he doesn't score a touchdown. Just on his receiving work alone, he's going to get some yardage. There's going to be something there. I just don't trust Jones, but that's why it's a showdown.
There is a lot of regression due for Aaron Jones, and the Giants are a prime opportunity for that regression, especially in the red zone, to be due for him. So I'm betting him basically on Aaron Jones getting a touchdown. Ashton Jeanty not. The Texans playing Arizona, very similar to the Texans playing the Raiders. The Raiders playing Philadelphia, very similar to, or if not worse, against Houston. The big key factor for me, Kenny friggin' Pickett. Oh my God, do you make everything so much worse than it has to be? So we'll play that one out. We'll come back next week with that one, Aaron Jones or Ashton Jeanty for it next week. All right, let's move on to the next one. I do have a defensive question in here. So which defense would you guys stream? The Chiefs, the Bills, or the Saints, Chase?
I'm going Buffalo. I'm going Buffalo over both Kansas City and New Orleans. For one, they have the best matchup. Cleveland allows the second most points to opposing defenses for obvious reasons. They've mixed and matched quarterbacks who aren't really quarterbacks all season. And then, I mean, on top of that, Buffalo's better at forcing turnovers than Kansas City and New Orleans. You're talking about, Shedeur. Shedeur can be prone to giving the ball away. I think the entire Cleveland team is prone to giving the ball away. And Kansas City's actually done a better job than Buffalo has in terms of putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, but Buffalo has done a better job of finishing once they get to the quarterback and actually sacking him, which is what you get points for. You don't get points for waving a hand in front of the quarterback's face. You don't get points for running past the quarterback like he's wearing a red jersey in practice. You get points for getting to the quarterback and knocking his butt down. And the Bills are a better team at that than the Chiefs and or Saints are. So for me, you stack everything up. I'm going with Buffalo over the other two.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm also with Buffalo. The Saints, I'm going to throw away quickly. It's an awesome matchup. Like based on the quarterback situation for the Jets, like an all-time awesome matchup. I don't want to big brain it and play a defense that's been bad this season. And realistically with the Saints this season, they have double-digit fantasy points 3 times this season, and most of what's keeping them in the high 20s and not towards the bottom of fantasy rankings is the Giants game like 2 months ago. Back, right. I think before Dart was even playing, or one of his first starts, right around that point. Either way, it's been a long time since they've done more than like 12 fantasy points, and even those have been few and far between. So it's just not it's not worth the squeeze, in my opinion, even with how great the matchup looks for the Chiefs. Man, I'm super interested in what happens in this game because this is a team that have been winners. They've been great. They've not been eliminated from the playoffs in a lot of these guys' career, outside of like Chris Jones, maybe. Like a lot of these guys have never been in this situation before, especially how that locker room's got to feel with how bad Gardner Minshew looked last week. Having Patrick Mahomes out, it seems pretty clear as day that Travis Swift is out of the building after 2 weeks from now, based on how he's talking on his podcast. It's got to be a really grim building to be in for the Chiefs. So I'm not, despite the Tennessee Titans being a great matchup, I don't really want to do that. So the Chiefs also have a really solid matchup, and the Browns actually have things to play for, have a division to potentially go get. That feels like a much more motivated team than the other two. We're out of the playoffs, just trying to keep a check for next season, more or less. So the Bills, I think, have a lot more to play for and kind of the direction I want to go with, matchups being kind of in the same realm anyways.
I'm being a little facetious hitting the show down on the defense, but we're the second to last week of the fantasy football playoffs, so why not have a little bit of fun here? So it's close to me. So for me, it's the Chiefs. That's where I come down different for you guys with the Bills. Now, I don't disagree with a lot of things what you guys said. Like the Bills on the season have been better at finishing off the sacks. Yes, 100%. The Chiefs have not been in this situation where they've been eliminated for playoffs. How hard do they play? They're still football players. They still have to play for contracts. Andy Reid's still going to coach. They're still going to play hard. I'm not ultimately too worried about that. This is what it comes down to me right now. I'm playing the team that's hotter at the moment. So the Chiefs have had 7 sacks the last 2 games. So they've been kind of coming around on that last 2 weeks anyway. And then the Tennessee Titans are 27th ranked offense for allowing points to defenses, going against a defense who is literally just 7th and was the best defense out of these 3 a week ago. I have 2 things for the Bills why I second guess them. One, this is a team that has a wide history of playing down to its opponent, even when they shouldn't. 2, they can't stop the run for nothing. And the one thing the Browns are going to try to do is run the football with Quinshawn Judkins. Now, how successful it's going to be, because he's been awful over the past month, I don't know. But I know the Bills can't stop the run. So if they're going to try that, I know Quinshawn Judkins is at least talented. So if they're able to get something going here and the Bills play down to their opponent, which they have been known to do, and the Browns defense gets a little bit healthier, which it might be this week, and kind of bounce back to their prime form, that could get interesting. That could get interesting. I still have in my top 10, by the way, but I do have the Chiefs in my top 5 this week. The Saints, look, they've had plus matchups the last month, and they're still just 18th in defense. Again, I'm with you guys. You can go ahead and just kind of throw them out. But for those reasons, I am going with the Chiefs. Cam Ward's always good for a couple of picks, and they've been finishing off sacks lately. So, I mean, you guys can rebuttal if you want to, but I feel like we all made our points.
No. 2 showdowns.
2 showdowns. Chiefs versus Bills. Let's get it.
This is a 2v1 both ends.
Yeah.
It is.
Let's go.
I'm just taking you guys on this week. Let's go for it. All right. So next question, and this is going to kind of piggyback to my Kenny Pickett hatred that everybody should have. But do I keep riding my stud Brock Bowers or stream a hot waiver tight end anyway? So they didn't mention exactly what tight ends that they were looking at. I brought up a few guys like Dallas Goedert, maybe Colson, Loveland, maybe Dalton Kincaid. I doubt it at this point, but maybe Colby Parkinson. I mean, these are guys who are at least on the waiver wire within the past month who may be available. Darren Waller would actually come into the conversation here. Kyle Pitts probably not after last Thursday. So I don't know. Chase, we'll go with you first. Would you roll with Brock Bowers or maybe somebody I've listed or somebody else you can think of?
No, I would roll with Brock Bowers. The only other option, like you said, of people that might be on the waiver wire would be Colby Parkinson for me. He's literally the only guy I would even consider looking at. But it's still Bowers. If you look at Parkinson and Bowers over the last month or so, they have almost identical stat lines. Parkinson has come on lately, and I like that because he's making us forget about Tyler Higbee. And if you guys know me, I don't even rank Tyler Higbee when he's healthy because I can't stand him. Sure, he's a good person and his mother loves him. Can't stand him as a fantasy asset because he's not an asset. But Parkinson would be the literally only other person I would look at here. It's got to be Bowers. Take the talent, take the fact that Pickett, is going to have to throw to somebody when he does throw. And who's the best pass catcher they have left? Brock Bowers.
Adam, how do you see this? Yeah,
extremely similarly. I just also very similar to the Jones and Jeanty one. Just wrote no. But I agree with what Chase said. If Parkinson somehow is on your waivers, I say somehow. There are leagues that I'm in where he is, so I'm not gonna say it doesn't happen, but it's just so bizarre to me. Dude, over the last 6 weeks has averaged out to a top 12 tight end. He should not be on waivers. He shouldn't be. But nonetheless, if he is, that's an option that's viable. Otherwise, Bowers still got targeted. I'm still gonna rock with Bowers. He's talented. He's getting his targets. Matchup sucks. Kenny Pickett sucks, but the other things are still going in your favor, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and we got another question coming up where we talk about Colby Parkinson again. So I'm not going to go into too much on him or even too much on Colson and Loveland, other than, yes, I agree with you guys. It would be Colby Parkinson for me. We'll talk about why in just a little bit. I have Brock Bowers at tight end 10, and I don't feel good about that. I've actually been looking for ways to bounce him outside my top 12 and to make him not a must start for the week, because I don't feel like Brock Bowers is a must start for the week. So the other name that I mentioned here, who actually is available, I don't know if he's available in 50% of leagues across the board, but he's available in a good majority of them, and that's Dallas Goedert. I would play Dallas Goedert over Brock Bowers this week against the Washington Commanders. Even as volatile as that Eagles offense has been, just being that he is a significant part of that offense, he has scored touchdowns throughout the year. It is a good matchup. I feel better about taking a flyer on a Dallas Goedert, who I've ranked as my tight end 8 on the week, than I would playing Brock Bowers this week with Kenny Pickett. So, Chase, you mentioned, okay, who's Kenny Pickett going to throw the ball to? It's got to be Brock Bowers. Okay, let's take that logic, because he was a tight end 21 last week with the same kind of idea against the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Houston Texans are 8th against the tight ends this season and fewest points allowed. If it's Pickett, I'm not touching anybody. I can't say it any plainer than that. I am not touching anybody if it's Kenny Pickett. And it's looking more and more like it's going to be the situation, especially when they're playing against an elite defense. This thing just go to hell in a handbasket too quickly. It has too much of a volatile floor to it. So I'd rather take a shot on Goedert. I'd rather take a shot on Colson Loveland. The only one I hesitate with is Kincaid, but even there, I'm kind of 50-50 on with Bowers. And that should give you an idea where I'm at with Bowers this week, because now we're talking tight end 2 territory. So if you have a hot streamer available, I'm considering that hot streamer.
That and you make a great point, and I can't disagree with you in terms of if Goedert is available, but I don't know that he is. Like you said, I don't know that he's available in over half of leagues, so I'm not necessarily sure how much of an option that is.
I know it's at least 45. I don't know if it's quite 50 in every league. There's some leagues where it is 50, but I know it's 45%. So it was enough for me to go ahead and mention here, especially since I have him as a top 10 guy.
It's not out of the question to start somebody over Bowers this week, but only if one of those guys is available. And unfortunately, I'm doubting that whoever has Bowers, I'm doubting that person has a streamer that's viable.
Off the cuff right now, with Quinn Ewers starting, Darren Waller against Cincinnati, or Brock Bowers?
Bowers.
Adam?
Bowers.
Okay. I would still go Bowers too, but I just kind of wanted to see if we can get the Cincinnati matchup, any kind of intrigue there, to see if that would be interesting or not.
Quinn Ewers negates all.
He does. If it's to attack Lavola, I think we might be having a conversation, to be honest with you. But yeah.
That's not a joke.
No,
if it were 2 at quarterback, I would have a much higher opinion of Darren Waller and Greg Dulcich this week.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so let's move. We're still sticking with tight ends here. So let's move into, we got a question. Do I start Colby Parkinson or do I start Colson Loveland this week? Just based on all of our answers, I can already tell it's Colby Parkinson. So, and tell me if you guys disagree with this. So first of all, he's been tight end 4 over the past 4 weeks because he's been on fire. You guys kind of mentioned that. Last 2 weeks of playing time has finally reached a stable level. So this is why I was hesitant to get on the Colby Parkinson train at first when it was starting to load up, because he still wasn't playing enough for you to be stabilized in a week-to-week situation. But the last 2 weeks, it's been a 71% routes run, 69% routes run. Still not great, by the way, but enough to where it's like, okay, you have carved out the starting receiving role for the Rams. And that's the key part that we're kind of looking for here. He had a 19% and a 17% target share over the last couple of weeks. And now you have a matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, who've given up the 7th most points to the tight end. And Devontae Adams is going to be out.
That's the key.
Right. When you add all that up, that's where it comes. Parkinson, for me, he's actually my tight end 5 on the week. I want to make a case for Colson Loveland, and I'll kick it to you guys if you have any comments. Colson Loveland's still a really good tight end. Again, like I said, I probably would still play him over Brock Bowers this week myself. He's my tight end 11 over the past 4 weeks. And here's the thing that's been kind of, I don't want to see it, but at the same time, it gives me a little bit solace in what his floor is because I've seen it. So Cole Kmet has been back to playing a significant amount like he kind of was earlier in the season, but it has not come at the cost of Colson Loveland like it did earlier in the season, where Loveland has established himself. He is the starting tight end. He is the guy who's going to get routes run. The difference is only that Cole Kmet is playing 2 reasons. One, more so because they have guys like Rome Odunze getting banged up and Luther Burden getting banged up. But 2, he's only coming in on 12 personnel. He was taking away some 11 personnel from Colson Loveland early in the year. That's not the case here. He is in my top 12 heading into this week. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that he's a decent option out there, especially given our previous question to this one. But any comments on what I had to say there?
I like what you said about Adams being out, because Devontae Adams, if anybody's been paying attention, he has done the vast majority of his scoring from 20 yards and in. And when he's out, I mean, who are you going to look to in the red zone there? Okay. I mean, yeah, they still have Puka, but I think that the tight end takes a much more prominent role than in that situation. So I would jump all over Parkinson over Loveland. And yeah, I would have him as a high play this week. I'm not sure about playing him over Bowers just based on talent alone, but over Loveland this week, hell yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go to Adam first on this next question. And it's a disgusting question, so I'll be curious to kind of see what he does here. Now, I'm going to preface this one. So first of all, this person's asking about, obviously looking for a desperate, waiver wide receiver ad here, asking about Troy Franklin or Luther Burden, who has more upside for week 16. Yes, Luther Burden's dealing with an ankle issue. I will be talking about that tomorrow with Ben McCown, Fantasy Football Advice Network. Brian Scott's on vacation for the next couple of weeks, so I am bringing in Ben McCown from the Fantasy Football Advice Network to talk about our injuries tomorrow. So Adam, I want to preface it with this. Let's pretend for a second that Luther Burden is going to get through this week of practice and play. I don't know for sure that's going to be the case, but for the sake of this question, let's pretend he's actually going to play. On an even field, Troy Franklin and Luther Burden right now, who has more upside in your eyes?
It is Troy Franklin. The reason being is that I don't think that he's going to be 100% even if he does manage to play, because we're having the conversation of, will you play or will you not?
Sure.
He is also, I think he relies on a lot of his athleticism. I mean, he's a yak guy. He's someone who makes explosive plays. At least ideally. I mean, he got good volume this past week, but it's really the first time that it happened. And granted, it happened in a small amount of playing time. So he clearly can take over a game. But the problem is like we've seen one game from Luther Burden where he broke 51% of the snaps. One. We have 2 games this past week, and then that week at 71%. Where you got over 10 fantasy points. Like, I just haven't seen it often enough. I know this past month hasn't been great for Troy Franklin, but last week was pretty good. And I think that we can potentially build on that. If we were talking a full bill of health and no Rome Odunze next week, then this would be a much different conversation. And I think I would potentially lean Luther Burden in that conversation. That if we're talking about 80% of Luther Burden, then I'm going to go with Troy Franklin. And I think that's probably realistic if he does play.
No, that's fair. Chase, got anything to add?
Do I like Luther Burden's athleticism and talent profile better than Troy Franklin's? Heck yeah. And I haven't made any, secret about that. But you also, if you listened last week, you heard my rant about Luther Burden and why I don't think he's anything more than a stash and hope. And there is no hope this week because we don't even know if he's going to play. And even if he does play, I think he's less than 100%. It's Franklin. I mean, Bo Nix's BFF is going to get some love. Luther Burden, even without Roma Dunze, is no guarantee to even, lead that team. So I'd go with Franklin over Burden.
Yeah, so I want to kind of piggyback off of Adam's point real quick about Burden's playing time, because that to me is the real issue here. Like, even the 1 week where he does go over 50% of the snaps, he still only had 69% routes run. You hear me talk about it with tight ends needing at least 70 for me to trust them. Wide receivers, it's more like 80. So like the most he's played is still coming way under that threshold. What can't be ignored though, and this is mostly due to injuries around the receivers around him, is the fact that his target share is going from 19 to 21 to 27 of the past 3 weeks. Like even last week getting injured, he still had 27% target share. It was a little insane, if you ask me. And the Packers, if you have no Roma Dunze, you're going up against the Packers. There's some favorable matchups there to like, because it was clear that he was going to be the favorite target, even if he wasn't playing all the time, over DJ Moore. Like DJ Moore did nothing until Luther Burden got injured in that game. Let's be perfectly clear about that. I want to find a different option. Like I don't even want to answer who has more upside. Troy Franklin's my wide receiver 42 coming into this week. You want to talk about playing time? He's got a playing time issue. We went from having weekly discussions about Troy Franklin being the number one wide receiver now over Cortland Sutton in the Denver Broncos to the dude might be the fourth or fifth wide receiver, depending upon what's available on the roster in the rotation all of a sudden. And I don't know what he did to piss off Sean Payton. We never
did something over the bye.
we never really do with Sean Payton. That's kind of the issue. Because he was performing really well, and all of a sudden he's a backup player to Pat Bryant and little Jordan Humphrey. Like that's what the rotation has been with these guys over the past few weeks. So just to kind of give you an idea, since the bye week, he has not even reached 70% of the routes run when he was getting consistently 80% of the routes run leading into the bye, just to give you the idea of how drastically of a shift in playing time that we're talking about. His targets since the bye have been 7%, 11%, and then finally with Pat Bryant hurt, 21%. But if Pat Bryant comes back and plays this week, and there's a decent chance that he might, I don't know how much I trust Troy Franklin, even with a questionable, banged up Luther Burden in a tough matchup on a cold night in Chicago on Saturday night. So my answer ultimately is I want to find something else. I'm with you guys. I'm with Franklin, but man, this is not looking good for either scenario. I don't feel great about this next one either, to be honest with you. So this next one is, do I actually have the guts to start Justin Herbert in week 16 if I'm projected to lose? So essentially asking, like, look, does Herbert have some upside that I can hope for to play him in a spot where I can't really necessarily settle for a floor? Adam.
Yeah.
This is gross.
Yeah, it is really gross. It's really freaking gross. It's hard to say for Justin Herbert without knowing the options, but targeting Dallas is always valid. So that's like the positive. It's been really rough lately for Justin Herbert. He is not someone who you want to play at all lately. So it's kind of the stoppable force versus the movable object they've got going on here.
Just what's the opposite of that? Like the what's the terrible and terrible analogy?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The stoppable force and the movable object.
It's so bad.
I think that you consider him, but I'd be hard looking at what your other options are. Like I would consider plugging my nose and looking at Shuck, for example, but obviously some of the really rough guys, I would not be going in that direction, like an Ewers or like a Pickett. Like those guys are a heck no. But some of those guys who were in the teens that we talk about in Superflex, I think have a real conversation. But
all right, Adam and Chase, you can play along with this one too. Let's do a little game with you guys. Okay.
All right.
Justin Herbert or Kirk Cousins?
Herbert.
Okay. Justin Herbert or Caleb Williams?
Williams.
Justin Herbert or CJ
Stroud on matchup.
Yeah, probably Stroud, just based on matchup. Yeah.
Okay. Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence playing Denver? Who's been red hot?
I
know. That's what makes that one tricky.
That's tough. He's got enough options underneath. I think, yeah. I might ride the hot hand with Lawrence. I might ride the hot hand with Lawrence there.
I think I would too.
But he's not a streaming option for you necessarily. I don't necessarily know that he's on the wire for him.
Some leagues he is. Yeah. He's enough for me to ask this question. Sure. Justin Herbert or Marcus Mariota?
Herbert.
Yeah, I think I'd lean Herbert.
All right, one more.
Well, it's closer than I would ever want to say.
Closer than you would think. One more for you guys, because this quarterback's been hot lately too. Justin Herbert or Aaron Rodgers against Detroit?
I think I take Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, it did because the Detroit matchup is pretty sweet. Yeah, probably lean Rodgers as much as I want to hold my nose and do it, but probably lean Rodgers.
I'll do one more because this is for Chase. Justin Herbert or Bryce Young?
It's Herbert, but I did have Young in my note. I said the only streaming option that I really thought about considering was Tyler Shuck. And I said, who else are you going to play over him? Even if you're projected to lose, and even if you got guys on the wire, JJ McCarthy, who's coming off.
I was about to say that one.
Bryce Young. But both of those guys have just as many questions as you have about Herbert right now. So you might as well save the roster spot, play Herbert, who you know is a decent quarterback. And, take your chance.
I'd play Herbert over McCarthy. So I just want to say that before I say this.
Yes.
McCarthy has 30 more points over the last 2 weeks.
So I was just about to say, fun fact, every single quarterback that I just listed has well outpaced Justin Herbert over the past 5 weeks, particularly since week 9. That was kind of why I went through. And every single one of those quarterbacks I just mentioned are also quarterbacks I have ranked in front of Justin Herbert this week. Every single one.
But they all still have questions. Every single one has a question.
But just to kind of give an idea here of exactly what we're talking about, since week 9, this has been dreadful. And I pick out week 9 because that's when Joe Alt went down. And that's when this offense completely and utterly changed. So he went from tossing about 7.9 yards per attempt and on pace for about 600 pass attempts for the season to 428 as his pace since then, and 6.4 yards per attempt on that low attempt rate. So you would be talking run first, don't throw the ball Justin Fields level pass attempts at a 6.4 yards per attempt. And Fields could run. So we saw what that turned into. Herbert hasn't finished as a fantasy starter since week 9. You have not been able to put him in your top 12 since week 9. That's how bad this thing has been. So the Dallas thing, while that intrigues people, and I get it, my point here is that Herbert has had multiple plus matchups since that time and has still not been able to crack the top 12 because of how this team is playing right now with no Joe Alt.
Yeah, I got nothing. There's no argument there. There literally is no offensive line in Los Angeles there, at least on that side of the stadium. There's no offensive line to speak of for the Chargers. So, I mean, you're not necessarily wrong there. It's just, I have a hard time ranking some of those other guys over him, right?
Ultimately, with that question, if you are projected to lose, I am not hitching my wagon to the Justin Herbert upside because there is none, even in this matchup. Kirk Cousins, we kind of, in a way, talked about this one, but just as a general thing here, is Kirk Cousins a Week 16 streamer? Is it a real bounce back that we saw last Thursday, or is it a trap, Adam?
Trap. and not even a particularly good one. Go look at the 2024 game logs of Kirk Cousins. The script writers are running it completely back. Kirk Cousins was awesome against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and dreadful the entirety of the rest of the season. But guess what it's been since Penix has been out? Dreadful, Tampa Bay, and it's going right back to dreadful. I'm fairly confident.
Chase, agree, disagree?
Yeah, no, I'm not streaming Cousins this week. I mean, Arizona hasn't been, they're kind of middle of the road against quarterbacks. They don't generate much of a pass rush, which should bode well, you would think, for Kirk Cousins because he can't move. But they've only allowed the 18th most points. And listen, Cousins is not going to throw 44 times this week. He's just not. Bijan, Tyler Algier, those guys should eat this week. Cousins isn't throwing 44 times. And if he's not throwing 44 times, what are you really getting out of him? Don't stream Cousins this week. There are other options.
Throw one other piece on this. I think betting positively on Kirk Cousins this week is betting that Kyle Pitts is going to do what he did last week again. If you think that happens again, you are out of your mind.
I mean, it's possible against Arizona. I mean,
you know how long we've waited for a good Kyle Pitts game? The next one's not coming for a while.
I know. I get it. I will say this. I mean, Drake London might be back this week. He did come back to practice on a Wednesday, so there might be a possible return there. And it is Arizona. Those are the intriguing things. Chase, you nailed it on the head. It took 44 pass attempts. I mean, he had a really good game in 44 pass attempts. It's not like it was like 44 pass attempts like a Jacoby Brissett game where it's like 44 pass attempts, 248 yards and 3 touchdowns, and somehow he gets you there. Like, no, this was legit. Like, it was almost 400 yards passing. Yeah, I'm with you guys. It is hard to sit there and looking down and be like, yeah, you could totally stream Kirk Cousins, who's washed up, past his prime, gives you nothing in the rushing with limited offensive weapons, even if it is against a bad defense in your playoff matchups. Superflex, fine. Yes, after that performance with this matchup, no problem playing him Superflex. But he's very much a mid-level QB2 in my book after a week like that, because there's such a singular pathway that he has to get through in order to be fantasy viable for you. And I'm not hitching my wagon to that when it comes to the playoffs. But I need a drink really badly.
Well, if you need one, let's make one then here. When we're looking at building our lineup out this week for DFS, I'm going to start with a player that I think Dan probably has been begging to use for the past month or so because of the price and everything else. And I keep throwing out high price dudes here. We're going to start this week. I think the conversation at quarterback has to start with Jacoby Brissett at 5,300. Okay. Yeah. This guy has been amazing. Right now, he's only the QB 15 in salary. Okay. But if you look at ECR rankings this week, he's ranked quarterback 8. The last 10 weeks, if you take the last 2.5 months into consideration, he's quarterback 2 overall behind only Josh Allen in DraftKings scoring. He's quarterback 3 if you want to extrapolate that out to points per game. I mean, he has been amazing fantasy-wise. I don't care about the records. We don't care about the records in fantasy. We care about what points they're putting up. He's had multiple touchdowns in every single game except the Jacksonville game. But in that Jacksonville game, he did throw for over 300 yards, so he kind of made up for it here. He hasn't attempted fewer than 40 passes since week 9. That's 6 straight games, guys, that he's attempting over 40 passes per game. If he's going to throw the ball 45 times a game, there's going to be good things happen. It doesn't really matter even who's catching the ball for him. You look at Atlanta, the matchup this week, they're middle of the pack against, opposing quarterbacks. They've got the second fewest interceptions. This is not a secondary to be feared and not a defense to be feared. In the last 2 weeks, they gave up 2 touchdowns last weekend to Baker Mayfield. They gave up 3 touchdowns the week before that to Sam Darnold, who is, kind of a Jacoby Brissett analog there, if you want to think about it fantasy wise. So yeah, I'm going to roll with Jacoby Brissett at 5,300 and pay down actually at the quarterback position. Part of how that's going to help us this week is because I'm going to also pay up then to pair him with Trey McBride, is all-world tight end at 7,600, and that is a monster amount to pay for a tight end. I'm going to throw that out there right now. I'm going to admit that to all of you right now. He's clear of Brock Bowers by, let me take a look at it here. He's clear of Bowers by literally $2,000. Brock Bowers is your tight end 2 in terms of your price. McBride is $2,000 past that, but he's also over 100 points clear of tight end 2 on the year scoring wise. And that's Kyle Pitts. Trey McBride would be the wide receiver 4 right now in DraftKings points overall this season. He trails only Jamar Chase in the league of any position in targets. He leads all positions in receptions this season. Only Devontae Adams and Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, have more receiving touchdowns. Trey McBride has been an absolute cheat code this year at the tight end position, even though you had to spend a 2nd or 3rd round pick to get him on your roster. Atlanta's been tough against tight ends if you want to look at matchups that way, but this is why you have to think about what actually happens in these games and how these teams are actually going to play. McBride is matchup proof. You don't sit him just because he's facing a team that's given up the second fewest points to tight ends here. He's only had 1 game all year where he scored under 10 DraftKings points, and that was week 5. Week 5 was also Kyler Murray's last game. So the last time that Trey McBride was borderline unusable, and I say borderline because he still had 9-some points that week, the last time that happened was with Kyler Murray over 2.5 months ago. With Jacoby Brissett, it's been lights out no matter who is on the field opposite him, receiver-wise or not, or running back-wise. Brissett's price tag, too, because you're paying down for Brissett, it almost offsets the Trey McBride thing to where you can still fill in a decent lineup around these guys. So while I mix up our drink, which this week is called the hot seat, because we've entered that time of year when coordinators are getting fired. We're going to start seeing head coaches fired, even though I know we've had Brian Callahan and Brian Daboll. There's not a ton more Brians left to fire this year, but we're going to start hearing about guys on the hot seat. Quarterbacks on the hot seat, Tua Tagovailoa, and you as a fantasy manager are on the hot seat this week, because if you don't do your job this week, you're out as well. So we're going to mix up the hot seat here. And while I shake the first part of this drink up, Dan, Adam, what are your thoughts on playing Brissett at quarterback? Do you have other thoughts at quarterback? And also, how do you feel about paying up that much for the tight end position in DFS this week?
So first of all, Jacoby Brissett being $5,300 is a joke. This isn't a better defensive matchup. I guess he still finishes a QB1 against Houston, and he's getting Atlanta, which is a far better matchup anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. We talked about this last week. The volume trumps anything else that looks horrible on the field. Plain and simple. So $5,300, absolutely I'm all about Brissett. And if we had this question kind of come up for DFS purposes last week, where are you willing to pay for Trey McBride, who was the highest paid tight end a week ago for DFS? And the answer is, if you paid up for him, you got what you wanted out of the guy, for sure. Now, Atlanta's been a little bit tougher across the entire season when it comes to tight ends, and there's definitely a wider gap between Trey McBride and everybody else this week. There's a reason for that. There are not a lot of tight ends I like this week. Especially when we're talking about, if you're playing Sunday, Monday slate, like if you're playing Sunday, Monday, George Kittle was definitely an option I'm going to go with, probably over Trey McBride, just because of the price difference. But going Trey McBride with that combination, not a problem for me whatsoever. And I'll throw out a couple other guys I'm looking at for values here. So Tyrone Tracy kind of reestablished that he is the lead back now that he's back for the New York Giants. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He's getting some passing targets. I think I'll have a decent game, especially at $5,700 against the Minnesota Vikings. Xavier Worthy is only $4,400 this week. I know it's Gardner Minshew, but I highly doubt, again, I'll talk about this tomorrow's show, but I highly doubt Rashee Rice is playing this week after being put in concussion protocol so late in the week. And being that Worthy's only $4,400, that's a shot there that I am definitely willing to take. And even Travis Kelce at $4,700. So while we all rag on Kelce, fantasy-wise, he's been fairly productive. And if there's going to be no Rashee, and against Tennessee, Gardner Minshew, he's gonna plug the middle of that field and short. So Travis Kelce is actually kind of an option for me this week as well, given that circumstance pretty much holds. And as far as the top price guys go, and Jameson Williams, who's just been on absolute fire going against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're playing in Detroit. No Laporta. As long as there's no Laporta and Jameson Williams has a good matchup, I'm playing him. St. Brown can get his, and Jameson can still get his in that situation. He's only $6,400. Those are some of the values that I had. Adam, what do you got?
I'm a little frustrated with you. Tyrone Tracy was the number one name that I had written down for a lot of the same reasons. He's averaging, by the way, 99.8 yards per game since Mike Kafka became the interim head coach, or rather since Brian Dable got fired, if you want to really talk about where that correlates. At any rate, that was definitely the number one guy in terms of other values. And then I just want to throw this out there on the Trey McBride front. He is worth that gap because the gap between him and the other tight ends is genuinely a handful of points. In half-point PPR, it is 3 points per game. And then those guys, by the way, that are behind him are Tucker Kraft, who is out, by the way, and Brock Bowers, who has Kenny Pickett. After them is when we actually have the conversation, which is like 4 or 5 points per game of a gap. Like that's worth what you're paying, because anyone else you're playing against that doesn't have McBride is playing at a couple point deficit. And when you're talking about paying up for guys at other positions, that's about the type of deficits that we're talking about, if not a little bit smaller most of the time. So I think it's worth it.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to pay up at tight end. We're paying down a little bit at quarterback. This next one, I think I'm going to get some, I think we're going to get some good conversation out of coming here from Dan, especially. I am going to pay up here for Devon Achane, 8,800. I'm going to put him in my lineup this week. And let me tell you why. He's the running back 2 in salary this week. So you're going to have, like I said, you're paying way up for him. He's also the ECR, running back 2 this week. He's got a good matchup here. He's running back 5 on the season in terms of points per game, total points overall. He's 3rd in the league in yards, 3rd in the league in targets. He leads the league in yards per carry of anybody who has over 40 carries this season. So, I mean, he's shooting the lights out that way. Basically, if you look at their numbers, Devon Achane has been Jahmyr Gibbs, except for he's only got 2/3 of the touchdowns that Jahmyr Gibbs has. He's got 11 touchdowns on a season. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, has 16, if I remember off the top of my head correctly. Achane's facing Cincinnati. We've talked about it already. This program, that's the worst DST in the league against opposing running backs. They give up the most points to opposing running backs there. I think the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel, if they know anything about football, which I realize is in question, to go back to Dan's rant earlier, if they know anything about football, I think they are going to need to hide Quinn Ewers. So I expect them to have to lean on Devon Achane. And if Ewers does pass the ball, I expect outlet passes and hot reads, which are going to go to Devon Achane, or short designed passes just to get his confidence up and try and get something rolling for Quinn Ewers. Where are those short passes going to go? Darren Waller, and in my opinion, to the running back. It sucks because I'm a Jaden Waddle owner in a lot of the leagues that I'm still in for the playoffs, but I think Achane runs this offense. This offense is going to have to go through him. There's no question about it. I expect him to have 20 plus touches. I know he's expensive, but even being that expensive, he's still graded out for me as the best running back value per dollar of the guys that I was considering. So then we get away from that. We got to put a wide receiver in our lineup. We know in DraftKings, we're going to have to play 3 of them anyway. Since we paid way up for McBride and we paid way up for Achane, we're going to have to find some more affordable options at wide receiver and running back. One of those affordable options that I'm willing to take a gamble on this week, we talked about his quarterback earlier. I'm going to go with DK Metcalf at 5,400 here. Just the wide receiver 25 in terms of his salary, but he's ranked in the top 15 this week, ECR wise. He's been a top 20 wide receiver this season. We need to find affordable options. And if you take a look at Metcalf, he graded out as my top value per dollar based on his projections for this week. And what I was looking at for the wide receiver position, he's on pace for almost exactly what he got you last season in terms of his targets, in terms of his catches, in terms of his yards, except he's already got 6 touchdowns. He only had 5 scores all last year. He trails only Kenneth Gainwell on that team individually in targets in the red zone. But, and he trails the tight end position, FAS, forget Arthur Smith, loves his tight ends. If you take the tight end position as a whole, Kenneth Gainwell, those two have out-targeted Metcalf in the red zone. But individually, DK Metcalf is still a red zone darling for this team. Okay. And as you get closer to the end zone, as you get inside the 10, inside the 5, that discrepancy disappears to the point where when they are actually on the goal line, DK Metcalf is their top option there. So Detroit allows the second most points to opposing wide receivers. I like that matchup. This game has the highest over-under on the slate right now, except that Pittsburgh is 7-point underdogs. I expect they're going to have to pass against a secondary and a defense that will allow points in the passing game. DK Metcalf is the only thing they have going for them in terms of scoring points. Fantasy-wise, I'll roll with DK at 5,400 as my lead wide receiver so that we can afford to use some of these other options I've talked about. I'm going to mix up the second part of this drink. I'll explain it to you when I get back here, but I'm going to turn it over again to Dan and Adam. What do you think about paying up for Achane? Dan, I know you especially had questions on Achane. And what do you think about going with DK or with other wide receivers based on our lineup this week?
I'll address the DK thing first real quick, just because, at $5,400, that matchup, it's not a bad thing. I will just say it was somewhat concerning coming off of his best game of the year that they went back to only giving him like 3 catches. And I know he scored and got 59 yards off of that, but it just shows you that they are still willing to be stupid and go away from their best players. I just want to kind of throw that out there, but it's not bad value for that. All right, so let's talk about the Devon Achane thing. So the good news with Achane, besides the match against Cincinnati, and besides the fact that he's just a tremendous player, is that he doesn't need a ton of touches to give you the value you necessarily want because he's super explosive and super efficient. That's the good news. What I would say to refute this point, though, is that I can spend $100 less and take Bijan Robinson, who is my number 1 running back on the week, going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who have been worse than Cincinnati over the past month against the running back position. Already fifth most points they've given up to the running backs over the season anyway. And Bijan Robinson, because Kirk Cousins is playing competent football now, we saw him against Tampa Bay, who's a much better run defense than Arizona is. Just light him up. And I know he had a big game through the air. He also had a big game on the ground. There was nothing they could do to stop him. He's a different type of running back. He's got a great matchup and a more positive situation because ultimately Quinn Ewers limits the offense because they will not be able to sustain drives in the same way. So ultimately, this is a ceiling blocker. I don't know. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I still think you're going to get a lot out of Achane. I think he's going to be good. And I'm not necessarily opposed to paying up for him, but I would rather have Bijan personally at functionally the same cost.
Well, those are all great points. Yeah, Bijan has a great matchup this week with Arizona. In fact, I brought it up earlier that I thought Bijan was going to eat this week. Achane has been excellent. He's got you this far. He's one of your big guns in the playoffs in terms of your redraft leagues. We have not used him in DFS. I'm willing to take a shot because he's not going to get in my opinion, he's not going to get a better matchup than this. I still like the opportunity of having to run the offense through him. I like him to just by accident get whatever points they score this week. But you guys make solid, valid points. And if you wanted to pay down, not down, but down from Achane for Bijan, that is a good substitution. When I did my values this week, Achane still graded out as the best running back value per dollar. For me, he tied Jahmyr Gibbs, and he was just ahead of Christian McCaffrey in terms of the value per dollar that I'm projecting for this week. So I'm going to roll with Achane. Your point about Bijan is valid though, and he'd be a great play as well, and would allow you to pay a little bit more. He'd free up some money for elsewhere. So let me talk about this drink real quick here. The hot seat that I've mixed up. You saw that I had to kind of mix it twice here. It was a double pour here. At first, I had a teaspoon of grenadine just in the bottom of my glass. Then I put the ice on top of that. And in my shaker, I mixed 1 ounce of rum, 2 ounces of cranberry juice. Then I poured that over the grenadine. What I did then is I combined 1 ounce of Fireball whiskey, 1 ounce of bourbon, and 2 ounces of peach nectar. Right there, peach nectar. Shook that up, and I poured that over the top of all of it, and it gave me this really nice gradation here from red to kind of pink to kind of orange to kind of yellow, just like the fire that is underneath the seat of everybody who's on the hot seat, hence why we call this the hot seat. I've garnished this with a cinnamon stick. I have a couple of maraschino cherries. This would be the 1 week where I would tell you that if you have the bright red fire engine red maraschino cherries that you buy on the top shelf by the Sunday makings in the grocery store, that those are acceptable for a garnish here, because they're not going to detract from the flavor of the drink, and the bright red color will go nice with the reds and the yellows in the drink. But I'm still going to go with my Luxardos because those are my favorite cherries that I have. Anyway, there's your DFS. There's your DFS cocktail. Best of luck to everybody this week, not only in your playoffs, but in your DFS lineups. Slanjava, everybody.
Slanjava, I love it. Okay, so guys, make sure you check out Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and download us on YouTube when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. I'll be back again, like I said, tomorrow. We get the injury inquiry episodes. It will be Ben McCown of Fantasy Football Advice Network helping us out with all those injuries. And of course, I'll have Chaz Filardi on the following day from Sports Betting Weekly. We've been red hot on our bets. My player prop article will be coming out on the Huddle on Saturday, as it always does. It is crunch time. Don't get distracted by the holidays. You be great and dominate. We'll see you soon.